Sounds like we're having a dance party in here.
You know me.
So apparently our music has been hijacked yet again. It's a little more exciting than usual, so...
We can cut that one out. I'm not...
Hey, it's all good. You guys you're listening to K-Talk Radio. This is PrepperCon Radio. It's a special segment every Wednesday from 9 to 10 a.m. We, of course, hold one of the largest, most exciting preparedness expos that I've ever been to. Hopefully I can say confidently that it's the largest in the nation, but we're still scouring the data to verify. This year, if we can hit the numbers we're targeting, which is 15,000 people to be at the event, I believe will be the single largest event in the nation. We've got a special guest on today, Cache Valley Prepper, who's done quite a few articles on EMPs, and in my circle of friends, he's the most knowledgeable when it comes to EMPs. So we're glad to have him on air with us today. Thanks for being with us, Cache.
Thank you.
So before the break, we were talking about EMPs, both the coronal mass ejections, so the solar generated, and then the nuclear generated. Let's talk this next segment. Let's talk about how we can kind of protect ourselves. Like what it'll do to cars, what kind of cars we need to get, how can we protect our electronics.
And will it do any good to protect your
Absolutely,
electronics?
yeah. So what do you think we should... Let's start with cars, because I think everybody likes cars, right? Because we drive to work, we drive to the store, everything we do is, requires a car. So let's talk about cars. How's it going to affect cars, and what can we do to be better prepared, vehicle-wise?
Okay, with cars, there are a lot of things people, I guess, a lot of bad information out there. They kind of take a little bit of research that has been done in the public sector out of context that was not funded and scope of it. There were just some real problems with the testing that has been done so far on cars, and it's led to a lot of misinterpretation of data. But,
that's funny because I've heard that quite a bit, but I've never... So let's talk about that study real quick. Okay. So the study that you're referencing was not a full study. It was a partial study is what it sounds like?
No, it was the EMP Commission, and the cars were tested on an EMP simulator up to a field strength of 50,000 volts per meter. And the cars were borrowed. The study was unfunded, so they were borrowed from other branches of government. And if they broke a car, they were responsible for the car. So the testing was, as soon as a car had any glitch whatsoever, it was stopped.
Right, they didn't want to have to fix the cars.
Exactly. So the field strength was gradually ramped up to that 50,000 volts per meter, but it never got to that point with most of the cars that did break because they stopped the testing.
Interesting. So what will or what could happen to vehicles is still a great unknown.
It's a huge unknown. And also that 50,000 volt per meter field strength number is pretty ambiguous because that was based on data taken from the Starfish Prime nuclear shot and what's known in the public domain about it. The military is a totally different animal. They know far more. They have well-funded studies about EMP, but that's
so I've read this EMP Commission report as well, and basically, essentially, what it says is that it's not likely that there will be much, if any, damage to vehicles during the EMP. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I believe that's kind of relative. I mean, they said, if 20% of the cars on the road die, that's kind of a big deal. Mm-hmm. But now what you have to realize is that we may not be dealing with 50,000 volts per meter. We've had 50 years to work on and optimize super EMP weapons, and Russians claim a field strength credibly of 4 times that.
Wow.
So, then you're talking a whole different ballpark of what it would do to cars. And the other thing is that between the 60s and when that study was performed, cars were much more sensitive because electronics are more efficient and they run at lower operating voltages than they used to, because the technology is getting smaller and smaller. And
Which makes it more sensitive to damage.
Damaged by lower voltages.
So do you recommend different types of vehicles for safety, or what are your thoughts on those?
Well, it's not a black and white issue like everybody likes to simplify things. We get confused by large amounts of data. It's how our minds work. So we try to turn it into look at the extremes and turn it black and white. But there's so many factors. A car could be totally untouched because it was shielded by something. A metal building was aligned, the direction it was parked. There was a mountain in the way. There's so many different things that could affect the equation. But what they kind of miss is it's not going to matter if there's no electricity to pump gas and refine oil and
Absolutely.
Right. Kind of my thoughts on that were, of course, obviously the newer the vehicle, the more electronics it has in it, the more subject it is to, or susceptible it is to damage. And obviously, as you get older into the 70s, most likely you wouldn't have any damage from any EMP, regardless of how strong that EMP is. Does that sound correct?
More or less. You'd have less damage is all we can really say. Because the Russians in the 60s did a test right after our Starfish prime shot in Kazakhstan, and they were much better prepared. They knew about the EMP. They had properly calibrated instruments, and they energized some buried wire and overhead telecom wire and put instruments on it. And so they got all kinds of data that we didn't get because right after that, we banned high-altitude nuclear testing.
Oh, boy.
So, but during this Russian nuclear test, I believe it was 62, I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think you're close enough.
But in that test, some diesel gensets that were pre-World War II diesel were knocked out. And we don't even know by what mechanism they were broken.
Interesting.
So
the reality is all vehicles are susceptible. Anything with electronics is susceptible, but really more importantly than what vehicle could survive or not is where are you going to get your fuel after it happens? Because everything's on electronic pump. Fuel is delivered either by pipeline or tanker, bringing it to your neighborhood, right? Those are going to be disrupted with an EMP. And so sounds like bicycles are a really good option. Horse and buggy are a really good option.
Yeah, do we really need to do anything and just kind of let it happen and be prepared to walk and ride a bicycle?
No, it's not that extreme because, it could be, we like to think of EMP as it's going to affect the whole planet, but it may not, we may not get the global hit from the sun. It might just be one little portion of Canada.
Yeah.
Or it might be the whole country, or, and the same thing with the farther you are away from the burst, the less the field strength is going to, the lower the field strength is going to be.
Yeah.
So it may not damage your vehicle. There will be a lot of vehicles that survive.
Well, one of the things that I've heard a lot is one EMP over the nation is going to take everything out, which is an absolute just crazy thought.
Not necessarily take everything out, but it could take down particular portions of the grid.
Yeah, it's everything is subject to the radius of the blast, right? Wherever the blast is, whatever happens, it has a distance it can carry, but one single event is not likely to take out the entire country.
Actually, that part can be true. One of the things people don't understand, they hear about when you think about one event taking out the whole country, it's more the height of the blast. Like, if it went off at 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface, it would hit the whole lower 48. Some of the lower 48 would only get 30 or 50% of the field strength, but it would fry the whole U.S. power grid, yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad you actually argued that, because I was actually just trying to plug to see your reaction. So
my advice is, this is the point where we can talk about Faraday cages, I guess, right? And other ways to protect our electronics, if we even want to try to protect our electronics. I'm going to get a 20-foot shipping container, park my rig inside.
there you go. That could work. So what about that? Would one of those steel Connex containers work as a Faraday cage?
Yes and no. Sure, it's going to provide a degree of shielding, but no, it's not a sealed envelope. They have holes in them, they have seams in them, and the principle of a Faraday cage is that the electrical charge moves through the skin of the Faraday cage. With any shielded envelope, say you have an ammo can or a shipping container, if it has if the paint on it isn't a conductive paint, that disrupts the flow of electrons through the skin where that touches. Or if it has a rubber gasket, things like this, like that people don't think about. So you'd have to strip it of paint, and you'd have to install conductive gaskets.
See, I've heard both sides where exactly what you're saying. If there's the smallest pinprick or whatever in hole in your Faraday cage, it's going to let waves through. But I've also read probably other speculation, which is where I become confused. That if it is, in general, in like an ammo box, I've heard the ammo box is a good Faraday cage. I kind of think that a microwave or an oven would be a good Faraday cage as long as it's whatever you put in there is insulated. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Ammo box would be a good Faraday cage if you remove the rubber gasket and replace it with a conductive metal gasket, and it's touching metal, not paint. The paint can be on the outside of the container, but not where the lid meets the body.
So you have to think of it like an electronic circuit, where you have contact, where you're having, say you're protecting a room and you've got a door there that you've got protected, you have to bridge those gaps with some type of electrical connection.
Exactly.
Okay.
And anywhere you have a seam, you have to say, what's in that seam? Is that material the same material that's in the wall?
That's a really good point you brought up. Now, does it need to be grounded, or does it need to be situated in anything special, or can it just be one complete skin all the way around the item?
It doesn't have to be grounded, but it should be grounded.
Okay.
And I've heard the opposite, that it shouldn't be grounded.
So why are you saying? So first we'll go to you, Cash. Why does it not have to be grounded, but is best to be grounded?
It doesn't have to be grounded, because even if it's not grounded, it's still going to conduct this flow of electrons around the object.
So you're kind of thinking maybe like an example of lightning hitting an airplane. It's not grounded, but everything inside is protected, right?
Exactly.
But also think of a building when they install, a lightning protection system on it. It's wrapped in metal, which conducts it and takes it right to the ground. Is that a fair comparison?
It's largely a safety precaution why we ground things. It gives a place for the current to discharge.
So that's why it's not absolutely necessary then.
But is it actually a current, or is it just a radio wave? Where currents, I agree, you should ground it and allow that to travel around the object and into the ground. Does a radio wave also act like electrical current?
it builds up an electrical current in the conductor.
Okay.
So depending on which EMP we're talking about, let's say we're talking about the geomagnetic EMP and the long conductor length. The longer the conductor, the greater the voltage that builds up. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah. So depending on proximity and depending on, the intensity, there are so many factors. It's really hard to be absolutely safe, I guess you'd say.
You really can't look at it in a vacuum.
Yeah.
But some protection is better than no protection, because it's not going to be black and white. It's going to be did it get just enough to break it or not?
Mm-hmm.
Is it fixable? No. These things matter.
So I like the rule of redundancy. So to me, it sounds like it's a good idea to have an extra radio, extra cell phone, some extra devices tucked away, if you can afford it, which, be simple, people, be reasonable in cost. You don't have to have all the bells and whistles, but it would make sense to put some of those items in a protected, shielded area, just in case. Because there's no way to know if an EMP is coming. I mean, you can watch what's going on. NASA can track, and other groups are tracking what's going on with CMEs, but there's no major guarantee, and there's no major guarantee.
Future.
Yeah, there's no guarantee. Yes, telling the future. Nobody's got that crystal ball. Well, we're running into another break. We're PrepperCon Radio on K-Talk AM 630. We'll be right back after a few short messages, and we'll have our special guest, Cache Valley Prepper, with us talking about EMPs when we get back. Action to try to resolve those things or prepare as best you can for those things. My philosophy is I just try to get ready for anything that could happen. My goal is complete self-reliance in the future, and so if I can get myself closer and closer to that now, then there's really nothing to worry about in the future.
I totally agree. And today we're talking about something very specific, which, yes, there are specific things that you can do to prepare for this specific event, but like you're saying, if you're self-reliant, in the end, it's really not going to matter. You're going to be able to handle pretty much any emergency, any situation that comes along.
Absolutely. We have a special guest. Let me bring him on the line. Oh, we just lost the call. We have a special guest who will be calling right back. Really fantastic guy. He goes by the name Cache Valley Prepper. And he is a author on Survivopedia. He's been on American Preppers Network. Writes for a lot of different preparedness and survival magazines, bulletin groups. Just really, really knowledgeable guy. So we're going to bring him back on here in a minute. But today's topic is all about EMP. We want to talk about the truths about it. We want to talk about some of the myths, kind of dispel those myths. Because there's a lot of garbage information on the web. Everyone thinks, I'll just search EMPs on the web and I'll read the first article they find, and oftentimes it's filled with misinformation.
Yeah, it's very confusing at times. I find information that says one thing and then another page that says the absolute opposite.
Exactly.
So it's hard to know what to believe, and that's true in not just in this particular instance, but in prepping in general. There are a lot of false information out there, a lot of bad information, a lot of unproved information that's just pure speculation.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and bring our caller back on. Hey, Cache Valley Prepper, are you there?
I'm here.
Sweet.
Fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
So we gave a little bit of background about you. You've written for Survivopedia, American Preppers Network. How long have you been writing and contributing to the world of prepping?
Oh, I guess I've been writing into prepping really full-time for about 5-6 years now, probably.
Full time.
Wow.
Fantastic.
That is really rare for somebody to be able to go full-time in prepping. That's awesome. Quite an accomplishment. So
Yeah,
we
still
really
working on
appreciate
it.
you being here.
Well, thank you.
So tell us, let's talk, just jump right into EMPs.
Okay.
Tell us, first of all, for our listeners, those that are listening, if you're having trouble hearing us, hop on our app, or download the app on your phone, or you can go to k-talk.com and stream live. We are taking calls. The number is 801-254-5855. We've got Cache Valley Prepper. He goes by Cache. Tell us, Cache, what is an EMP, first of all?
Well, an EMP is basically a supercharged radio wave, I think is probably the easiest way to think of it.
And what does it do, or what does it take to actually have one of those go off?
Well, they can be caused by the sun in what's called a magnetohydrodynamic EMP, or a geomagnetic event.
Okay.
Maybe better known as a coronal mass ejection.
CME, coronal mass ejection, is what causes it. That's the natural cause of EMP. One of the main natural cause of EMP that we're concerned with. But it can also be caused by nuclear weapons detonated high in the atmosphere, and it's really important to differentiate between the two. I think that's probably something a lot of people probably miss out on and need to be corrected.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I remember, well, I don't remember, I wasn't there. I actually read an article about...
I remember reading an article.
I think it was a CME, that actually took out the telegraph.
Yeah.
Like, it was early in the...
18.
Yeah, that'd probably be the
1870s.
event in 1852.
Or 52, yeah. Now, so what that did is, from what I understand, it basically shut down the entire system. Now, did it destroy this, parts, or do you know much about that one?
That event, a little bit. That event, it destroyed the newly laid transatlantic cable, and it burned up a lot of telegraph stations, burned lines right off the wires. But at that point, the world was not dependent on electricity. It was a luxury.
Whereas today we are absolutely dependent as a society, as even most of the world, anywhere you call a first world country, is absolutely dependent on it. Even second and getting into the third world countries are absolutely dependent in certain ways on electricity. So what do we need to know about these things? Is it dangerous to us to be out while one of these happens?
No, there's no danger to the human body from the EMP itself. That's kind of its own myth too. If some large voltages are created, so if you happen to be touching a long conductor when it happened,
right.
That would be good.
And that's what I understand is really what happened back to the telegraph system back in the 1850s, is that these long stretches of metal act as conductors, and actually, in some instances back then, caught some of these telegraph stations on fire because of the long, larger copper wires that conducted this electromagnetic pulse, where at that point you could actually have some physical harm rather than just the wave traveling through your body, is I think what maybe Scott was alluding to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that, the thing with the natural EMP caused by the sun, a solar event, is we have a lot of really long conductors that run parallel to the Earth's magnetic field. So all of the pipelines, the telephone cable, the power grid, it all is positioned along the Earth's surface, so it's perfectly polarized to take up the EMP.
I never thought about that. So the pipes, obviously, the electrical grid as well is easily an antenna for this, I guess you could call it, a conductor.
Even long conductor, even buried cable.
Even buried cable. How deep can a cable be buried and still be affected by it?
That's a good question.
It would depend on any electromagnetic shielding provided by the Earth between the cable.
And some of the cables are actually shielded themselves, some cables, communication cables in particular.
True.
But what I also understand is that, say you're in a metal building of some sort, that connects to the Faraday cage. We'll talk about that a little later. But these large beams and so forth can act kind of like as conductors so you should get some distance away from any type of metal building, metal structure, if there is, like you say, a high altitude nuclear detonation, or we're expecting a coronal mass ejection.
Well, one thing, a metal building would really have to have extensive modifications in order to provide Faraday cage shielding effect for electronics, because a hole as small as a quarter-inch could cause a leak in the shielded envelope at certain frequencies that could damage electronics.
Okay, 'cause I've heard that a lot of these electronics will survive because, say, they're stored in a large metal warehouse. For a distribution warehouse, something like that, like a Walmart warehouse, something like that, where this large metal building, and then the electronics themselves are in their cardboard packaging, so there's some insulation around the device itself. So those electronics would survive. What's your opinion on that?
Absolutely. They're also inside a static bag, which is another layer of EM shielding.
Which I guess in some cases your phone does come in kind of a static bag, but not all the time.
Most oftentimes not.
Yeah.
So not all the time.
So let's jump back a little bit. I think we're going a little too fast for myself as well as some of the listeners here. So we started talking about coronal mass ejections, and let's jump to high altitude nuclear EMP. Can you explain to the listeners what that is in the last couple of minutes before we go to break?
Sure. It's caused by a nuclear weapon detonated above about 25 kilometers to 40 kilometers, and it produces a high-energy EMP multipulse. There are 3 elements to it, so it's more difficult to protect against than the geomagnetic EMP, and it will destroy devices that are not grid connected, shorter conductors.
Okay. So will it take out the grid as well as the non-connected elements?
Yes, the E3 component of, well, 2 parts. That depends. Normally in a standard nuke, the E3 component created by the fireball of the nuclear explosion, that is most like the geomagnetic EMP caused by the sun.
So an E3 is essentially a type of radio wave, is that?
E3 is one of the 3 types of energy given off by a EMP energy given off by a high altitude nuclear explosion.
Gotcha. Okay.
We
So
call them E1, E2, and E3 to differentiate, because you have to take different measures to protect against each one.
So E1, E2, are they as big of an issue for us as E3, or do they all just have different problems that they cause, or what's the situation there?
E1 is caused by the gamma rays, and it knocks high energy electrons off molecules in the upper atmosphere. It's known as the Compton effect.
Okay.
And it results in a 1,000-fold increase over the EMP that would be generated by a surface burst.
Okay.
So, and then scientists had no idea. Well, they had no idea about the Compton effect until the hardtack Yucca Shot in the 50s.
Tell us a little bit more about that. I'm not as familiar with that as should be.
In our nuclear testing, how we became aware of EMP is that during the hardtack series of nuclear shots, we sent up the Yucca Shot, which was a small nuke, lofted into the atmosphere on a balloon, and it got up to about 80,000 feet or so, where they detonated it, and that was the first time that they experienced EMP, and they thought the instruments weren't calibrated for it because it was so huge.
So they just weren't ready for it at all.
No, they didn't know that it would happen.
Well, we're hitting a hard break right now. We've got to take a break for a second to go to our sponsors.
Okay.
We're going to be right back. We've got Cache Valley Prepper. We're talking EMPs. It's going to get deeper, so hang in there. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to PrepperCon Radio. Wednesday morning's jam session. I don't know.
EMP
Dance
session.
party. Our music's a little different today. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being with us. We've got Cache Valley Prepper on the line. We're talking about EMPs. Before we jump back into it, though, I want to give a special shout out to our show sponsor. I want to give UtahSafehaven.com a big shout out. If you're looking for recreational land, if you're looking for a bug out location, they've got it, and they can even get you financed. They've got special in-house financing. No credit check, really affordable. Everything starts at 20 grand. Yes, I said 20 grand. That's like buying a $3,000 car that'll go 36 miles per gallon. It's a sweet deal.
For 500,000 miles.
And it's, check it out, UtahSafehaven, HAVEN.com. They're also going to be at PrepperCon. PrepperCon is April 15th and 16th. Southtown Expo Center here in Sandy, Utah. We are still looking for volunteers and vendors. Right now, we've got about 112 vendors set up for the event, and we're still looking for about 50 more. So if you want to get involved, go to PrepperCon, that's PrepperCon.com. You can be a sponsor, a vendor, and we're a volunteer. And if you're ready to buy tickets, just hop on and buy tickets. We're ready for you.
Awesome.
We're excited. We've got Cache Valley Prepper with us. He actually gave us a great review last year and gave us some good advice on what we can improve on. So thank you for that.
Oh, no problem.
Let's dive right back into EMPs.
Okay.
So Shane brought up he kind of wanted to talk about vehicles again. I kind of wanted to talk about plan, like what can we really do? What are your thoughts? I mean, what are you as a prepper and as a professional prepper, which you're one of the lucky few? What are you doing to be better prepared, or what do you recommend we do to be better prepared, or even just better educated about EMPs and their potential?
Well, I realize that I am not our target listener necessarily, so I think it doesn't have to be complicated. You can get a dual band ham radio for $25 today. It's amazing how much they've come down in price, and it could be simple. Probably the best, most EMP resistant Faraday cage most people have in their home is probably an aluminum pressure cooker.
That's actually a really good idea.
If they just line that with a non-conductive lining and put their old cell phone in there and a spare ham radio in there. And
I've also heard you could take the box your ham radio came in, wrap it in tinfoil.
yes, you can. As long as you overlap it and make sure the seams are there. There's a big difference in the thickness of aluminum between a pressure cooker and the aluminum foil, but the best mileage you could get out of aluminum foil would be to alternate layers of aluminum foil and a non-conductor.
Okay, that makes sense. So
That's gonna
wrap
give you
it
better
aluminum foil, wrap it in
protection
saran
than
wrap,
solid aluminum.
and then wrap it in aluminum foil. I understand you can also purchase copper foil.
Yeah.
Have you found any copper foil out there? Because obviously copper, I think, is. Let me give you where I'm talking from. Is I did some work on the data center, and I know for a fact that all those
data
buildings,
center?
the data center over here,
The
data center. I helped specify some materials in there. Never got to do any work on
Where
it.
everyone's listening.
Exactly, where everybody's
Gotcha.
like, hey, out there, data center. But I know for a fact that it is entirely lined with copper mesh from floor to ceiling. So I know, and obviously that's a question because we're talking about the gaps of spacing between, in your Faraday cage, what can let, a pulse come through, a radio wave come through there. And I guess not necessarily that the copper mesh is preventing that. I think it's more about snooping, spying, and keeping snooping ears out of that facility more than EMPs. Does that sound correct?
Well, it's both.
Okay.
You know, the same protection that offers attenuation against EMP will also block out signals. And any conductor will do it. For EMP, the thing is that if you use a mesh, it needs, like, say you wanted to have some windows, say your shielded envelope is a whole building and you wanted to let some light through, it needs to be 20 opening per inch or smaller mesh.
Okay.
And that'll get all of the wavelengths that are damaging to microelectronics.
Okay, here's another question I had for you. I've read differing opinions on, say, underground bunkers, the depth that you need to be underground to protect yourself from an EMP. I've heard from as little as a few feet to as much as 30, 35 feet of soil, and it probably depends on the density, whether it's rock or just soil, whatever it is. What's your opinion on that?
Well, you have to keep in mind the requirements for the shielded envelope. And you have to look at that medium and, you know, what's the soil made of, how much EM shielding is it going to provide.
Can I try to debunk the bunker idea here real quick?
Of course.
Yeah.
You have to have an air source. Every bunker I've seen has a 3 to 6 inch pipe,
PVC, whatever.
PVC pipe coming straight out of the ground. Most of them have 2 or 3 of those pipes coming straight out of the ground. A lot of them also have a radio line coming up so they can connect to radio waves. Now, wouldn't those holes with the PVC pipes or the radio line be problematic? Because that radio line goes directly through the shielded item, directly into your electronics inside that item.
Does it work that way? Would it follow a wire into a bunker?
Problematic, yes. Impossible, no. You know, you can put surge arresting and protection equipment on lines that penetrate the shielded envelope, but it has some very specific requirements to do that. Most surge protecting equipment will not, the relay that kicks in the surge arrest is not fast enough to stop the E1.
Right.
It happens in a, you know, just a...
It's meant more for an electrical current than a radio wave.
Right.
Well, both.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, anything that penetrates the shielded envelope is going to it's going to create a problem. And yes, if you run a line into a conductor into the shielded envelope, yes, it could potentially conduct a charge into the house's circuitry.
Okay, so find a cave, block off the entrance for your temporary shelter for the CME or for the nuclear blast that's coming, right? And just be in there temporarily with your electronics, and then you're fine. Okay.
If you're building an underground bunker, you can afford a little bit of conductive gaskets and surge arresting gear.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think for everybody that's listening, the number one thing you need to be doing is really get back to the basics of self-reliance. You know, we don't know when, because there's always a chance an EMP is going to strike. We don't know when something bad's going to happen, whatever it may be, whether it's an EMP, whether it's the economic collapse. I mean, we all have our theories of what's coming first, but I think everything comes back down to just redundancy, basics, self-reliance. Grow a garden. Start producing your own food, producing your own usable, clothing. If you know how to sew, get even better at it. If you don't know how to sew, learn how to sew. Start doing the things that we used to do daily 20, 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, even better.
Absolutely, because EMP is not going to fry you to death. It's going to kill you the old-fashioned way through starvation and disease.
Absolutely.
And
So,
that's one thing that I preach on a regular basis is change the way you live now to the way we'll live in the future.
Absolutely. I think that's really wise words. We need to get back to how it used to be, because that's how it's going to be.
Yeah.
Well, but less than 2% of the population is involved in any kind of food production.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That during the Great Depression, it was 50%. Well, it was 25%, and
In the cities, right, and
equal
50%.
another, just as many people had parents who did, so they were able to get trained in gardens going. So 50% was the population was able to make some sort of contribution and pull us out. Today with 2%, that would not happen.
And people are going to be starving on the streets. I mean, the other issue is water. Everyone's so dependent on a grid system pumping water. All the water pressure we have for our wonderful shower every morning, thank you electricity, thank you grid. If anything disrupts that, goodbye water supply. So you better be stockpiling water, storing water safely.
And let me throw another wrench into the system here. If the grid goes down and we have 99 nuclear electrical generating facilities around the country, they will no longer have the ability to cool their cooling ponds. And you're looking into meltdown at that point.
Won't that be fun?
So if you live near a nuclear facility, you might want to consider moving away.
There you go. Well, we want to thank you for being on with us. We're almost out of time. Always a pleasure. Your content that I've read online is fantastic. Where can people find your articles or more information about prepping?
Oh, they can friend me on Facebook. They can follow me on Facebook. They can like the Survival Sensei Facebook page. That's my company. Or they can just Google Cache Valley Prepper. They can email me at cachevalleyprepper@gmail.com. But if they just Google me, my articles will come up.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on with us today. We really appreciate you. We'll be talking to you again soon. Oh, obviously, we talk all the time. But we will look forward to seeing you over. Are you going to be making it out again for PrepperCon this year?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate you. We love having knowledgeable, amazing guests on. We try to have the best show we can possibly have for you, the listener, to be informative and get you the right information. Thanks for tuning in this week to PrepperCon Radio on K-Talk. Thank you, K-Talk, for having us host this show. And stay prepared, everybody.
See you next week.
Are you planning to bug out or get out of Dodge when things get bad?
You still there?
You have your food, water, and clothes, but where will you go? UtahSafehaven.com has ideal retreats for your whole group.
There.
Founded by preppers, for preppers, they have properties ranging from small campsites to 50 acres or more. Pricing starts at just $19.9. And the best thing, everyone qualifies to purchase with in-house financing and no credit check. Call Utah Safe Haven today at 435-315-8346 or online